The breaking point. The azure skies of Nexus 7 might have been beautiful if not for the perpetual haze of industrial smoke that turned the horizon into a smudged watercolor. Darius Vega wiped sweat from his brow, leaving another streak of grime across his weathered face. 12 hours into his shift in the lithium mines, his muscles burned with familiar pain, but it was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest. 20 years ago, he had commanded battleships for the United Earth Alliance. Now he swung a plasma drill in the service of the Solarian Empire, the very power he'd once fought against. History, as usual, had been written by the victors. The Alliance was now remembered as a failed rebellion, and Darius Vega, once a decorated strategist, was just another laborer in the mines. Shifts ending old man, called Thomas, a younger miner with a perpetual smirk. Still standing. Must be getting soft on us. Darius allowed himself a thin smile. When you've been working these mines for 15 years, kid, come talk to me about soft. The warning siren blared through the tunnels, signaling the end of their shift. Workers began the long trudge back to the surface, their headlamps creating a solemn procession of light through the darkness. Darius moved with them, his thoughts already racing ahead to his modest prefab unit, and more importantly, to Maya. His daughter was the one bright spot in this dust-choked existence. At 19, Maya possessed her mother's sharp intelligence and Darius's stubborn determination, a combination that both filled him with pride and kept him awake with worry. In a place like Nexus 7, those traits could be dangerous. The transport shuttle was crowded as usual, workers packed shoulder to shoulder for the 20-minute ride back to the colony. Darius closed his eyes, blocking out the stench of sweat and mineral dust. He allowed himself to remember the feel of a command chair beneath him, the hum of a battleship's engines, the vastness of space stretching before him. Freedom. His reverie was interrupted by the shuttle's abrupt stop. Opening his eyes, he saw Colony Sector 4 through the grimy windows. Home, such as it was. The prefab housing units stretched in uniform gray rows, differentiated only by faded numbers stenciled on their sides. Unit 347 was at the end of the third row, distinguishable by the small hydroponic garden Maya had somehow coaxed into existence despite the harsh conditions. "Maya," he called, stepping through the door. The unit was empty, but that wasn't unusual. Maya often worked late at the engineering lab where she had secured an apprenticeship. At least her position kept her away from the mines, though it came with its own dangers. The Empire valued technical skills, but had little tolerance for innovation that didn't serve its purposes. Darius stripped off his filthy work clothes and stepped into the sonic shower, letting the vibrations shake loose the day's accumulation of grime. As the dirt disappeared, the collection of scars across his body became visible, souvenirs from the war and his subsequent rehabilitation when the Empire had captured him. Clean and dressed in civilian clothes, he prepared a simple meal from their weekly rations, synthetic protein cubes and hydroponic vegetables from their garden. He set aside a portion for Maya, covering it to keep warm. 3 hours later, she still hadn't returned. This wasn't like her. Maya always sent a message when she would be late. Darius checked his comm unit again. Nothing. The first tendrils of worry began to curl in his stomach. He was about to head out to look for her when his comm unit finally chimed. He snatched it up, expecting to see Maya's face. Instead, he found himself looking at Ilara Chen, Maya's supervisor at the engineering lab. "Darius," she said, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. "Have you heard from Maya?" The worry bloomed into full-blown dread. "No, I was about to call you." Ilara's face crumpled slightly. "They took her, Darius. Imperial security forces came to the lab this afternoon." The world seemed to tilt beneath him. "Why? What happened?" "Her project," Ilara whispered. She was working on a more efficient water reclamation system for the colony, but the Empire, they wanted it for military applications. She refused, said the people here needed it more than their warships. Ilara looked away from the screen. She didn't just refuse, Darius. She spoke out. In front of the regional governor, Darius closed his eyes, a cold wave of fear washing over him. Where did they take her? I don't know for certain, Ilara said. But there were rumors. The guards were talking about Blackstone. The name hit Darius like a physical blow. Blackstone wasn't just a labor camp. It was a death sentence. Located on the dark side of Nexus 7's small moon, the facility was where the Empire sent its most troublesome dissidents. Few ever returned, and those who did came back, broken in body and spirit. I need to go, Darius said, already reaching to end the call. Darius, wait. Ilara's voice stopped him. There's more. The regional governor is hosting a reception tomorrow for the Empress. She's making a rare visit to the outer colonies. Empress Selene, the supreme ruler of the Solarian Empire, architect of its expansion across 3 star systems, and personally responsible for the final defeat of the Alliance. Darius had never seen her in person, but her image was everywhere. A beautiful, cold-eyed woman whose delicate appearance belied a ruthlessness that had crushed worlds. Thank you, Ilara, he said, his mind already working. After ending the call, Darius stood motionless in the center of the small living space. Maya's belongings surrounded him, her technical manuals, the small sculptures she crafted from scrap metal, her half-finished projects scattered across her workbench. His little girl, who had never known a life outside of Empire control, who had been born in the aftermath of defeat, who nonetheless carried the fire of resistance in her blood. He moved to his sleeping alcove and knelt beside his bed, prying up a loose section of flooring. From the small cavity beneath, he withdrew a box he hadn't opened in years. Inside lay the remnants of his former life. His Alliance military insignia, a small holophoto of Maya's mother, and a data crystal containing encryption codes that had once given him access to Alliance intelligence networks. The crystal was likely useless now, the codes long expired, but it represented something more important, a connection to who he had been before. Commander Darius Vega, who had outmaneuvered Imperial fleets and inspired loyalty among his troops. The man who had promised he would never bow to tyranny. Somewhere along the way, survival had become more important than resistance. He had justified it as necessary for Maya's sake. She needed a father, not a martyr. But in trying to protect her, had he taught her to accept chains? No more. His decision crystallized with surprising clarity. There was only one way to reach Maya now, only one path to Blackstone for someone like him. He would need to get arrested, but not for any minor infraction. If he wanted to be sent to the same facility as Maya, he would need to commit an offense the Empire couldn't ignore. An offense like insulting the Empress to her face. Darius tucked the Alliance insignia into his pocket. By this time tomorrow, he would either be on his way to Blackstone or dead. Either way, he would no longer be bowing to the Empire. The regional governor's reception was being held in the administrative center, the only truly impressive building in the colony. Unlike the utilitarian structures that housed the workers, the center was built of imported marble and glass, a monument to imperial prosperity that mocked the poverty surrounding it. Security was tight, with imperial guards stationed at every entrance, their black uniforms and energy rifles creating a perimeter of intimidation. Darius had no invitation, no way to enter through conventional means. But 15 years in the colony had taught him things about its infrastructure that even the Empire didn't know. The maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the administrative center were poorly monitored, an oversight born of imperial arrogance. Why guard against sabotage when the penalty for resistance was so severe that few would dare attempt it? Dressed in stolen maintenance coveralls, Darius moved through the tunnels with purpose, his years as a military commander evident in his confident stride. Anyone who saw him would assume he belonged there. Authority was often more about appearance than reality. The service entrance to the main reception hall was guarded by a single bored-looking security officer who barely glanced at Darius's stolen identification badge before waving him through. Inside, the contrast between the colony's usual austerity and the lavish reception was jarring. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting prismatic light over the gathered dignitaries. The air was heavy with the scent of real flowers, imported at enormous expense, and the sounds of actual music played by living musicians rather than synthesizers. Food displays featured delicacies from across the empire, genuine animal protein, exotic fruits, wines from Earth itself. And surrounding it all were the colony's administrators and imperial officials, dressed in finery that cost more than what a miner earned in a year, laughing and conversing as though the suffering outside these walls didn't exist. Darius moved among them, a tray of drinks providing his cover as he searched the crowd for his target. He found her at the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of fawning officials. Empress Selene was smaller than he had expected, her physical presence belying her outsized influence on the fate of worlds. Her white blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate style that incorporated the silver circlet of her office. Her gown, the deep purple of imperial authority, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was her eyes that held Darius's attention, pale blue, almost silver, and utterly without warmth. This was the woman who had ordered the bombardment of Alliance civilian settlements, the woman who had instituted the rehabilitation programs that broke the will of captured soldiers, the woman who now held Maya's life in her immaculately manicured hands. Darius set down his tray and began moving toward the Empress. Imperial guards tracked his movement, their eyes narrowing as they noted his direction, but he reached the edge of the circle before they could intercept him. The regional governor was mid-sentence, describing the colony's increased production quotas, when Darius stepped forward. The circle of officials parted in surprise, creating a direct line between Darius and the Empress. "Empress Selene," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly hushed reception hall. "I've come to discuss your empire's concept of justice." The governor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Guards, remove this man immediately." But the Empress raised a delicate hand, stopping the guards mid-stride. "No," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "Let him speak. It's rare that I have the opportunity to hear directly from our laborers." Her eyes met Darius's, calculating and curious. She didn't recognize him. Why would she? Commanders captured in the war were just statistics to her, nameless enemies processed through the machinery of imperial justice. "My daughter was taken to Blackstone yesterday," Darius said, "for the crime of wanting to help her fellow colonists. She designed a water reclamation system that could have improved thousands of lives, but the Empire saw only its military applications." A ripple of shocked murmurs ran through the crowd. No one spoke to the Empress this way. No one dared. "And you believe this merits interrupting an official imperial function?" Selene asked, her tone almost amused. "I believe it demonstrates the fundamental corruption of your rule," Darius replied, reaching into his pocket to withdraw his alliance insignia. He held it up, letting the light catch the stylized Earth and stars. "I am Commander Darius Vega, formerly of the United Earth Alliance 7th Fleet. I fought against your tyranny once, and though you defeated our forces, you never conquered our spirit." Recognition flickered in the Empress's eyes. "Commander Vega, I remember the reports of your capture. You were supposed to have been thoroughly rehabilitated." "I learned to pretend," Darius said, "to survive for my daughter's sake. But I will not pretend any longer, not while she suffers for the crime of compassion." The Empress studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a small, cold curving of lips that never reached her eyes. "You know," she said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather, "most who speak to me this way do so from behind screens, hiding in the shadows of resistance networks. There's something almost refreshing about your directness." She tilted her head slightly. "What exactly did you hope to accomplish with this display, Commander?" "I want my daughter released," Darius said simply. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but the Empress didn't join in. Instead, she stepped closer to Darius, close enough that he could smell the subtle floral scent of her perfume. "Your devotion to your child is admirable," she said. "But surely you knew I couldn't possibly grant such a request. What message would that send to our other subjects? That defiance is rewarded if performed with sufficient dramatic flair. Then send me to Blackstone in her place, Darius said. Something shifted in the Empress's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a flicker of respect. An interesting proposal, she murmured. But I think not. Your daughter made her choice, as you have made yours. She stepped back and addressed the guards. Take Commander Vega to Blackstone. Not in his daughter's place, but to join her. Let them experience the consequences of defiance together. As the guards seized him, Darius felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The first part of his plan had succeeded. Now he just had to survive Blackstone long enough to find Maya and somehow escape. A task that had been considered impossible by everyone who knew of the facility's existence. But then, the Empire had once considered the Alliance's resistance impossible too. As the guards dragged him away, Darius looked back at Empress Selene. My daughter spoke truth to power, he called out. I've never been more proud. Can you say the same of your legacy, Empress? Will history remember you as anything more than a tyrant who crushed worlds beneath her heel? The last thing Darius saw before being removed from the hall was the Empress's face, her perfect composure finally cracking to reveal something dark and furious beneath. Good, he thought. Let her remember me. Let her wonder why I seemed almost glad to be arrested. The doors closed behind him, and Darius Vega allowed himself to be led away, one step closer to his daughter, one step closer to Blackstone. The real challenge was just beginning. Into darkness. The transport shuttle to Blackstone carried no windows. Darkness enveloped the prisoner compartment, broken only by the occasional flash of indicator lights from the restraint system that kept Darius secured to his seat. The journey stretched for hours, each moment marked by the rhythmic thrum of engines and the labored breathing of fellow prisoners. Darius was not alone. The shuttle carried 12 other individuals, political dissidents, black market traders, and others who had earned the Empire's special displeasure. None spoke. The weight of their destination pressed down upon them, crushing any impulse toward conversation. When the shuttle finally docked with a metallic clang, harsh white light flooded the compartment. Imperial guards in black armor entered, their faces concealed behind reflective visors that showed prisoners only their own frightened expressions. On your feet, barked the lead guard. Welcome to Blackstone, your new home. They were herded through a series of airlocks and decontamination chambers. Blackstone was situated on the dark side of Nexus 7's moon, a facility carved into the lunar rock itself. The artificial gravity was set slightly higher than standard, Darius noticed immediately. Another small cruelty designed to wear down prisoners' bodies over time. In the processing center, they were stripped of all personal belongings. Darius watched as a guard tossed his Alliance insignia into an incinerator chute. The small piece of metal melted away in seconds, but Darius had already accomplished what he needed with it. The symbol had served its purpose, getting him to Blackstone. Name and prisoner number, demanded a bored-looking administrator seated behind a reinforced plexiglass barrier. Darius Vega, former commander, United Earth Alliance. I don't have a number yet. The administrator's eyes flicked up from his terminal, a brief flare of interest. Alliance Command. Thought they were all dead or rehabilitated. He returned his attention to the screen. Prisoner 9-7-8-42. Memorize it. Forget your name. It's irrelevant here. They were issued gray jumpsuits with their numbers stenciled across the back and chest in bright orange. Next came medical processing. Invasive scans, mandatory vaccinations, and the implantation of tracking chips at the base of their skulls. This monitors your location, vital signs, and compliance, explained the medical technician, a thin woman whose clinical detachment couldn't quite mask her discomfort with her role. Attempting to remove it triggers an immediate shutdown of your central nervous system. Fatal, obviously. Darius felt the cold metal of the implant gun against his skin, then a sharp pain as the chip was inserted. For a moment, dizziness overwhelmed him as the chip integrated with his nervous system. Side effects include headache, nausea, and temporary disorientation. The technician recited mechanically. Report to medical if symptoms persist beyond 48 hours. Next. The final stage of processing involved a holo recording of the Empress herself, her image projected life-size before them as they stood in formation. You have been sent to Blackstone because you represent a unique threat to Imperial stability, her recorded image stated, those cold eyes seemingly able to meet each prisoner's gaze simultaneously. This is not punishment. This is opportunity. Your labor here serves the greater good of the Empire. Rehabilitation through meaningful work. Accept this opportunity, embrace your purpose, and you may yet earn redemption. The recording faded, leaving behind a lingering afterimage that seemed to burn into Darius's retinas. Move out, ordered a guard. Assignment sectors. They were marched through tunnels carved from lunar rock, the walls occasionally interrupted by reinforced view panels that revealed the star-strewn blackness of space. Blackstone was an engineering marvel, Darius had to admit. A self-contained ecosystem buried within a lifeless moon, sustained by technology and human suffering. At a junction in the tunnel system, the prisoners were divided into groups. Darius and 3 others were directed down a corridor marked Mining Sector D. "What are we mining?" asked one of the prisoners, a young man whose defiance hadn't yet been processed out of him. The guard didn't answer, but the older prisoner beside Darius whispered, "Stellarite. Element that doesn't exist naturally in our system, found only in asteroids from the Cygnus Drift." Darius glanced at the man, noting the network of scars visible at his collar and wrists. Long-term prisoner, by the look of him. "I'm Darius," he murmured. "Corbin." The man replied, voice barely audible. 3 years here. Don't get attached to names, though. Numbers last longer than people in Blackstone. Mining Sector D opened into a vast cavern where dozens of prisoners worked at extracting a faintly luminous blue mineral from the rock face. The air was thick with dust that sparkled eerily in the harsh lighting. Guards patrolled on elevated walkways, energy rifles at the ready. "New blood," announced their escort to a scared overseer. "4 for your section." The overseer, a burly man with Imperial military cybernetic enhancements visible at his temples, looked them over with disinterest. "Put them on extraction. Basic duties until they're acclimated." Basic duties, as Darius quickly discovered, meant the most physically demanding work. Breaking larger chunks of stellarite-infused rock into manageable pieces using sonic hammers that vibrated at frequencies designed to shatter specific mineral compositions. The work was brutalizing. Within hours, Darius's hands were blistered and bleeding despite the protective gloves issued to prevent contamination of the stellarite. His shoulders ached from the constant vibration of the hammer, and the dust made each breath a struggle. "Pace yourself," advised Corbin during their first water break. They set impossible quotas. Meet them too easily, they raise them. Fail too badly, they reduce rations. Find the middle ground. Darius nodded, conserving his energy. "My daughter," he said after a moment. "She was brought here recently. Maya Vega would be classified as a technical prisoner, engineering background." Corbin's expression remained carefully neutral. Technical skills get assigned to sectors A or E. A is communications and facility maintenance. E is, he hesitated, special projects. Neither is accessible from D sector without clearance. "I need to find her." Corbin took a careful sip of water. "You can't just wander between sectors. Tracking chips set off alarms if you leave your assigned area. Guards carry override codes for prisoner transfers, but those are changed daily. So I need a guard's code," Darius concluded. A bitter laugh escaped Corbin. "Good luck with that. Guards travel in pairs, and their code units are biometrically locked." The overseer barked for them to return to work, ending the conversation. As Darius resumed his position at the rock face, his mind was already working through possibilities. 20 years ago, he had specialized in penetrating supposedly impregnable Imperial security systems. The methods might have changed, but the underlying principles rarely did. Days blurred together in Blackstone. Wake cycle, protein rations, 12 hours of mining, protein rations, sleep cycle. Repeat. Darius worked methodically, observing patterns, collecting information. He learned the guard rotation schedules, noted which ones were stricter than others, identified the informal prisoner hierarchy. On his 5th day, during the communal meal period, Darius noticed a group of prisoners sitting apart from the others. They were a mixed lot, humans and non-humans alike, but they shared a certain watchful quality, a consciousness of their surroundings that reminded Darius of military personnel. "Who are they?" he asked Corbin, nodding subtly toward the group. "Trouble," Corbin replied shortly. "Resistance sympathizers. Most have been here longer than me. Empire keeps them alive as examples, but isolates them as much as possible." Resistance. Darius kept his voice neutral, but a spark of hope kindled within him. "I thought the Alliance was crushed years ago." Corbin gave him a measured look. "The Alliance was a formal military organization. The Resistance is something else, more scattered, less predictable. They operate in cells, independent but connected. The Empire publicly dismisses them as terrorists, but privately." He shrugged. "They're worried enough to have a standing shoot-on-sight order for confirmed members." Darius considered this new information. If resistance elements existed within Blackstone, they might be his best chance at locating Maya and finding a way out. But approaching them carried its own risks. In a place like this, trust was a luxury few could afford. His opportunity came 3 days later when he was assigned to a maintenance detail alongside Lena, a woman he had observed sitting with the resistance group. Their task was to clear mineral buildup from water filtration systems, mindless work that allowed for quiet conversation away from guard oversight. "You've been watching us," Lena said abruptly as they worked, her hands never pausing in their movements. "Dangerous habit." "I'm looking for my daughter," Darius replied, matching her voice, nothing that could be interpreted as interest or agreement. "I think you might have reasons to want to help, beyond simple charity." Lena's hand stilled for a fraction of a second. "Your Alliance. Former command, by your bearing. Not many of those left." It wasn't a question, but Darius nodded anyway. "Commander Darius Vega, 7th Fleet." A ghost of a smile touched Lena's lips. "Vega. The strategist who held the Procyon Gap against Imperial forces for 3 months with just 4 ships. Your tactics are still studied, you know. In certain circles." "Ancient history," Darius said, though something in him straightened at the recognition, at the reminder that not all had been forgotten. "Perhaps," Lena conceded, "but history has a way of echoing." She resumed her work, voice dropping even lower. "Your daughter's name?" "Maya Vega. 19. Engineering specialist." Lena was silent for so long that Darius thought she had decided against helping him. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Sector E. They'd got her working on stellarite applications. Advanced stuff." Darius felt a rush of both relief and concern. Maya was alive, but Sector E, special projects. What was the Empire having her work on? "I need to reach her," he said. "Impossible," Lena replied flatly. "E sector is the most heavily guarded area in Blackstone. Even we haven't managed to penetrate it fully." "Nothing is impossible," Darius countered. "Just improbable with current information. Help me get that information." Lena studied him for a long moment, her eyes calculating. "We might be able to arrange a maintenance assignment that would get you closer, not into E sector, but to a junction point where you could potentially make contact." She paused. "But we would need something in return." "Name it." "Intelligence," she said simply. "You were Alliance Command. You know things about Imperial security protocols, command structures, weaknesses, things that might still be relevant." Darius considered her request. The information she wanted was dangerous, the kind that could get people killed if used improperly, But then he had already committed himself to a path that offered no safe options. "Agreed," he said. "But I need to speak with Maya first. Confirm she's all right." "We'll arrange it," Lena promised. 3 days. Be ready." The maintenance assignment came exactly as promised. Darius was paired with another prisoner he hadn't met before, a silent man with burn scars covering the left side of his face. They were tasked with repairing ventilation systems near the sector junction points, areas where the different sections of Blackstone interconnected. As they worked, moving through maintenance tunnels that ran parallel to the main corridors, Darius's companion suddenly stopped and pressed a panel that looked identical to all the others. A section of wall slid silently aside, revealing a narrow passage. 10 minutes, the scared man said, speaking for the first time. Not a second more. The camera loop won't last longer. Darius nodded and entered the passage, which sloped upward toward what he assumed was an observation point. The passage ended at a small chamber with a reinforced view panel, and beyond it, Sector E. Unlike the mining sectors with their raw, excavated appearance, Sector E was pristine. White walls, advanced equipment, and prisoners in specialized containment suits working with the refined stellarite. The blue mineral glowed more intensely here, processed into various forms: liquid suspensions, crystalline structures, powder. And there, at a workstation near the view panel, was Maya. She looked thinner than when he had last seen her, her face drawn with exhaustion, but she was alive and apparently uninjured. She worked with focused intensity, manipulating stellarite samples with specialized tools, recording readings on a data terminal. There was no way to signal her without alerting the guards who patrolled the laboratory floor. Darius pressed his hand against the view panel, the closest he could come to reaching his daughter. "What are they doing in there?" he murmured, more to himself than expecting an answer. To his surprise, a voice responded from a hidden speaker in the observation chamber, weaponizing it. Darius turned to find a holographic projection had activated behind him, a small blue-tinted image of an older woman in a scientist's uniform. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Dr. Aliyah Nazari," the projection replied, "former lead scientist on Project Stellarite. Currently prisoner 9-30-07. The hologram flickered. "Your resistance friends arranged this communication. I don't have much time." "What do you mean, weaponizing it? What is Stellarite?" "An alien mineral with unique properties," Nazari explained rapidly. "It responds to consciousness, can amplify neural signals, translate thought patterns. We originally developed it for medical applications, neural repair. But the Empire," she shook her head, "they're using it to develop a neural suppression network. Broadcast-capable mind control, essentially." Cold horror washed over Darius. "And my daughter? She's brilliant," Nazari said, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. "They're using her to solve the broadcast stability issues. She doesn't know the full application. They compartmentalize information, but she's inadvertently helping them complete the project." "I need to get her out," Darius said, watching Maya work beyond the glass. "All of you." "Impossible," Nazari replied. "Even if you could reach E sector, the tracking chips can be overridden," Darius finished. "Every system has vulnerabilities. The Empire built their security on fear, not infallibility." The hologram flickered more insistently. "Time's almost up. One more thing you should know. The Empress is returning to Blackstone in 5 days for a demonstration of Project Stellarite. If it's successful..." The projection began to break up. Deployment throughout the colonies. Total control. The hologram dissolved completely, and moments later, Darius heard footsteps in the passage behind him. His scared companion appeared at the entrance. "Time's up," he said urgently. Guards changing rotation. As they made their hurried way back to their assigned maintenance area, Darius's mind raced with new information and possibilities. The Empress returning. A demonstration of the Neural Control Project. His daughter at the center of it all. It was a nightmare scenario, but it also presented an opportunity. Security protocols would change for an Imperial visit. New vulnerabilities might emerge. And if he could reach Maya, warn her about the true nature of the project. Back in D Sector, Darius found Lena waiting for him during the meal period. Her eyebrow raised in silent question. "I saw her," he confirmed quietly, "and I learned what they're doing with the Stellarate." He explained what Dr. Nazari had told him. Lena's expression grew increasingly grim. "If they perfect this technology, resistance becomes impossible," she said. "Not just armed resistance, even the thought of it could be suppressed. Which is why we need to act now," Darius replied. "Before the Empress's visit, before the demonstration. What exactly are you proposing?" "Not just an escape. The awakening." The barracks night lighting cast faint blue shadows across sleeping forms as Darius slipped from his bunk. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Rushing would only draw attention. 3 other figures rose silently from different sections of the room. Corbin, Lena, and Malik. Their fellow prisoners remained motionless, their breathing steady, but Darius knew many were awake, deliberately looking away, providing the passive cooperation of the oppressed. They converged at the barracks waste disposal unit, a simple chute that, according to Corbin's intelligence, connected to a broader maintenance system. Malik, the systems engineer, produced a tool fashioned from mining equipment, a crude but effective override device that disabled the chute's sensors long enough for them to remove the interior panel. 15 minutes until the next automated security sweep, Malik whispered as they squeezed into the narrow passage beyond. "After that, we have a 3-hour window." The maintenance tunnels were cramped, dusty arteries running through Blackstone's structure, bypassing main corridors and their surveillance systems. They moved in single file, guided by Corbin's memorized map of the facility's hidden infrastructure. Occasionally they would halt, pressing themselves against the walls as the muffled sounds of guard patrols or service droids passed nearby. Their first destination was Medical Sector, where Dr. Lin awaited with the electromagnetic disruptor that would temporarily neutralize their tracking chips. "The range is limited," she explained as they crowded into a small equipment room, her voice barely audible. "It will only affect chips within 30 meters of the central hub. And once activated, we'll have at most 45 minutes before the system detects the anomaly." "That's all we need," Darius assured her, though privately he calculated tighter margins. "Is the interface ready?" Lin nodded, indicating a modified medical scanner. "It's coded to your biometric signature. Only you can activate it." Another piece falling into place. Darius checked the improvised chronometer Malik had assembled. They were still on schedule, but barely. Their next objective was more challenging, reaching the junction between D Sector and administration. This required passing through a security checkpoint that, under normal circumstances, would be impossible to bypass without proper clearance. But circumstances were not normal. Maya's accident with the Stellarite sample had created exactly the kind of controlled chaos they needed. As they approached the checkpoint, they could see the effects. Increased guard presence, but also increased confusion, with personnel being reassigned to address the perceived threat in E Sector. Crucially, the checkpoint's secondary entrance, used for maintenance and emergency response, showed signs of recent use. Raven, the former security officer, handed Darius a stolen service uniform. "Put this on. You'll approach from the front as part of the response team. Create a distraction. We'll handle the rest." The uniform was an uncomfortable reminder of Imperial authority, but Darius donned it without hesitation. His alliance training had taught him that sometimes to defeat an enemy, you must first resemble them. Approaching the checkpoint with the measured stride of someone with purpose and authority, Darius kept his face partially obscured by the uniform's elevated collar. The guards, already dealing with multiple issues, gave him only a cursory glance as he presented the forged authorization code Raven had prepared. "Response Team for Administration Sector," Darius stated tersely. Director Callis requested additional security following the E Sector incident. One guard checked the code against his terminal. "Didn't get notification of this," he said, suspicion edging into his voice. Notification systems are being updated due to the incident. Darius replied with just the right note of impatience. Hence the manual authorization code. Would you prefer I tell the director you delayed his security protocols? It was a calculated risk, invoking Callus's name. The director inspired fear throughout the imperial hierarchy, and the prospect of earning his displeasure was often enough to override procedural concerns. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. Secondary team remains here until further notice. As Darius passed through the checkpoint, he triggered a subtle malfunction in the door's locking mechanism, a trick Malik had taught him. Behind him, the guards were already distracted by the apparent technical glitch, creating the opening his companions needed to slip through the service entrance. They regrouped in a supply alcove just beyond the checkpoint, quickly ditching the service uniform for the nondescript gray coveralls of maintenance personnel. From here, they could access both administration sector and, crucially, the connecting passages to E sector where Maya was being held. Lynn, Malik, you proceed to the control hub as planned, Darius instructed. Corbin, Lena with me to E sector. Remember, we synchronize at 300 hours precisely. The team split, each group moving toward their assigned targets. Darius led his small team through increasingly restricted areas, relying on the confusion caused by Maya's diversion and Raven's knowledge of security blind spots. E-sector loomed ahead, its entrance a heavily reinforced door with multiple security measures, retinal scanners, weight-sensitive flooring, atmosphere sampling to detect unauthorized individuals. Under normal circumstances, it would be virtually impenetrable. But Maya had promised help from the inside, and as they approached, Darius saw evidence of her work. The security panel beside the door showed intermittent power fluctuations, subtle enough not to trigger alarms, but sufficient to create vulnerabilities in the verification systems. She's good, Lena murmured, watching Darius work with the override device Malik had created. Must take after her father. Darius allowed himself a brief smile. Her mother, actually. She was the real genius in the family. I just followed orders well. The security system yielded with a soft click, and the heavy door slid open just enough for them to slip through. Beyond lay the pristine laboratory environment Darius had glimpsed through the observation window days earlier. White walls, advanced equipment, and the ethereal blue glow of processed stellarite. At this late hour, the lab was minimally staffed. A few technicians worked at distant stations, their attention focused on stabilizing the accident from earlier. Guard presence had been increased, but they were primarily stationed at key junctions rather than patrolling the open laboratory floor. Darius signaled for Corbin and Lena to wait while he moved forward alone, using the lab equipment for cover. His goal was a specific workstation that, according to their intelligence, was assigned to Maya. He found it empty, the display still active with complex molecular simulations of stellarite compounds. A handwritten note was partially visible beneath a data tablet. Maintenance Level 3, Station 47B 250. Maya had left him instructions. Darius memorized the location and quietly retreated to where Corbin and Lena waited. Change of plan, he whispered. We need to get to Maintenance Level 3. Corbin's expression tightened. That's deeper in the restricted zone. Security will be heavier. It's where Maya will meet us. Darius replied simply. We go. They navigated through the laboratory's periphery, avoiding the main work areas where technicians might spot them. Using service corridors that ran parallel to the primary research spaces, they descended to Maintenance Level 3, a network of support systems that regulated the environmental controls for the sensitive stellarate research. Station 47B was tucked away in a corner of the maintenance level, surrounded by humming filtration units that provided excellent sound masking. As they approached, a slender figure emerged from the shadows. Dad? The voice nearly undid him. Maya stood before him, thinner and paler than he remembered, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but burning with the same determination he'd always seen in her. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, relief washing over him. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, holding her at arm's length to examine her. "I'm okay," she assured him. "But we don't have much time." She nodded to Corbin and Lena. "The demonstration is being prepared as we speak. They're planning to test the neural broadcast on a group of prisoners at 500. "Can you stop it?" Lena asked. Maya's expression hardened. "Better than that. I can reverse it." She turned to a concealed workstation. "When I realized what they were really building, I started making modifications to the broadcast system. Instead of suppressing independent thought, it will temporarily enhance it, breaking the conditioning they've been using on prisoners and staff alike." "You can do that?" Darius asked, amazed despite the dire circumstances. "The stellarate responds to consciousness," Maya explained quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. "The Empire wants to use it to limit and control, but its natural state is actually the opposite. It amplifies neural patterns, strengthens connections. I've been subtly altering the calibration for weeks, telling them it was necessary for stability." Darius felt a surge of pride. Even in captivity, Maya had found a way to resist, to subvert the Empire's plans. "But for this to work," she continued, "we need access to the main broadcast array in administration, and we need to protect the modified stellarite compound I've prepared." She indicated a small case containing vials of luminous blue liquid. "If they detect the alterations before the demonstration begins, they'll simply replace it with the original formula." Darius checked the chronometer. 2:58. In 2 minutes, Lynn and Malik would be positioning themselves to access the control hub and activate the tracking chip disruptor. "We need to synchronize with the rest of the team," he said. "They're preparing to neutralize the tracking chips." A look of realization crossed Maya's face. The tracking chips. She opened a drawer in her workstation and withdrew a small device. "I've been studying them as part of my assigned research. They share technology with the neural broadcast system. If we modify the chip disruptor signal, we might be able to extend its effect throughout the entire facility." Lena stared at her. "You're talking about disabling every tracking chip in Blackstone simultaneously." "Not just disabling them," Maya said, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. "Temporarily converting them into receptors for the enhanced stellarite broadcast. Every prisoner would receive the consciousness-expanding effect directly through their chips." The implications were staggering. Instead of affecting only those present at the demonstration, they could potentially reach every prisoner in Blackstone. Thousands of individuals whose capacity for independent thought and resistance had been systematically suppressed. "We need to get this information to Lynn and Malik immediately," Darius said. "Lena?" She nodded. "I know the fastest route to the control hub. Give me the modification specs." Maya quickly transferred the necessary data to a small chip, which she handed to Lena. "Tell them to integrate this with the disruptor signal. The frequency alignment is crucial." As Lena disappeared into the service corridor, Darius turned to Corbin. "We need a secure path to administration for the modified stellarite compound. Any suggestions?" Corbin considered for a moment. "The atmospheric regulation system runs directly between here and the demonstration chamber. Maintenance access only. Minimal surveillance." "Perfect. Lead the way." Gathering the case of modified stellarite, they followed Corbin deeper into the maintenance level, eventually reaching a narrow access tunnel that housed the environmental control conduits. "This will take us directly to administration," Corbin explained, "but it's going to be tight."